So how do we know if one thing really causes another? I mean, not just that they're connected, but that A literally makes B happen. It's a huge question. Today, we're going to open up the researcher's toolkit and see how they find the truth. Let's get right into it. Here's the roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with a classic problem, the causality conundrum. Then we'll look at the gold standard for proof, the experiment. From there, we'll dive into 3 amazing tools researchers use: simulating reality, using the digital world, and even experimenting inside our own minds.
All right, first up, the causality conundrum. You know, it's so easy to see 2 things happening around the same time and just assume one is causing the other. But here's the thing, that assumption can get you into a lot of trouble.
Let's take a classic example. When ice cream sales go up, so do shark attacks. So does that mean your dessert is summoning Jaws? Of course not, right? There's a hidden factor, hot summer weather, that makes you want ice cream and makes you want to go swimming. That's the trap of mixing up correlation with causation.
So let's get this straight. Correlation just means 2 things are moving together. It's a connection. That's it. Causation, well, that's a much higher bar to clear. For something to be a cause, it has to happen before the effect. And this is the really hard part. You have to rule out every other possible explanation. Okay, so if just watching the world isn't enough to prove cause and effect, how in the world do we actually find the truth? Well, we do it with the scientific gold standard, the experiment. This is hands down our most powerful tool for telling the difference between a real cause and a simple coincidence.
The secret sauce is actually pretty simple. Experiments aren't passive. They're not about just watching. They're active. A researcher goes in and intentionally changes one and only one variable to see what happens. That's how you can be sure you found the actual cause.
But, you can't always run an experiment in the real world. Sometimes it's just not practical, or maybe it's completely unethical. So what do you do then? Researchers turn to tool number 1 in our kit, the vignette experiment. It's a really clever way to simulate reality in a controlled way. Just think of a vignette as a flight simulator, but for social situations. Researchers can build these super realistic scenarios like a tough ethical dilemma at work and then see how real people react. It lets them test all sorts of sensitive topics in a way that's totally safe. And don't think this is just about making up stories. It is a super disciplined process. There's a whole system of careful planning, precise implementation, and totally transparent reporting to make sure the results are solid and that other scientists can replicate them.
Now, these vignettes usually come in 2 main flavors. One type straight up asks you, what would you do in this situation? It's about what you say you'd do. The other kind is a little more subtle. It tracks the choices you make between different scenarios, and that reveals what you'd actually do, even if you don't realize it.
Okay, but you might be thinking, this all sounds great. But if the scenario feels fake, then the data you get is pretty useless, right? So how do you make a hypothetical situation feel truly real? Well, that question about realism brings us right to our next set of tools, which have been absolutely supercharged by technology. I'm talking about the internet and virtual reality. They basically turn the whole world into a giant laboratory for researchers. Just look at this. Online experiments give you the 2 things that simple surveys can't: total control over the variables and the ability to randomly assign people to different groups. And that combination, that's the magic formula for proving causation. And platforms like Amazon's Mechanical Turk, or MTurk, have been a total game changer. Suddenly, researchers have access to these huge, diverse pools of participants from all over the world. You can get data back in hours, not months, and for a fraction of the cost. It's really democratized the whole research process. But, of course, there's always a catch. You've got to watch out for things like people not paying attention, or even web bots trying to fill out your survey. It means that good online research requires some really clever design to build in checks and make sure the data you're getting is top-notch. Now, if you want the ultimate level of realism, you turn to virtual reality. The whole goal of VR in research is something called telepresence. It's about making a user feel so completely present and immersed in the simulation that their reactions are 100% genuine. On the one hand, VR gives you this unbelievable realism and control over the environment. But on the other hand, you've got real-world hurdles. Some people get motion sickness, the equipment is still pretty expensive, and there are some really unique ethical questions you have to think about very carefully. And that brings us to our final tool. What if I told you that you could run a powerful experiment with 0 cost, 0 equipment, and 0 risk? Well, you can.
Welcome to the laboratory of the mind, the thought experiment.
A thought experiment is basically a structured journey of the imagination. You create a hypothetical scenario and then you follow it to its logical conclusion. You're manipulating variables and testing the boundaries of a theory, all inside your own head. And this isn't just about daydreaming. This is a serious scientific tool. Thought experiments can be used to confirm theories, like Newton imagining his cannonball flying so fast it orbits the Earth. Or they can challenge theories by revealing a paradox, like Schrödinger's famous cat, which is somehow both alive and dead at the same time. But even pure imagination needs a framework to be useful. A really good thought experiment requires careful planning and what some call disciplined imagination. It's a truly rigorous mental exercise, not just a random flight of fancy.
So, in the end, it's pretty clear that finding the truth isn't about having one single perfect method. It's about having a diverse toolkit and knowing how to choose the right tool for the right question.
And what an amazing toolkit it is. We've got vignette experiments to safely explore tricky social situations. We have online and VR experiments to reach a global audience and build incredibly realistic worlds. And we have thought experiments to push the very boundaries of theory with nothing but our own imagination. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you've seen the power of these incredible tools, what's that one big idea or that nagging question that you would want to test in the laboratory of your own mind?